Uh, dear Ambassador, dear Mr. Monservisi, our dear guests and members of DEİK, Turkish Foreign Relations Board, welcome and thank you for joining us, even if only virtually, for this DEİK talks on Turkey-EU relationships with a specific focus on Turkey-Italy relationship in the post-COVID era. I'm thankful to our distinguished guest speakers for making the time to join us today. I would like to mention that today we have a very wide participants today listening to us. Mainly, of course, DEİK members, but we have all the business community in Turkey are also joining us with specific interest in Italy-Turkey relationship as well. So I welcome all. I will begin with some brief introductions for those of who are less familiar with DEİK and our work. As you know, DEİK, at DEİK we represent about 60% of Turkey's leading businesses, and many of which have extensive ties with the EU and with Italy. The Turkey-Italy business, as I chair both EU Business Councils and the Turkish-Italy Business Council, this meeting today was set up to focus on these ties specifically. Although the situation is still developing, unfortunately, COVID-19 has hit Italy particularly hard. The implications of this on the prospect of the European project, and especially the future of both EU and Italy relations with Turkey, are therefore of vital interest for many of our members. Today we are going to discuss in detail the implication of this crisis. In recent years, there have been several instances which have tested resilience globally. I think that COVID-19 is just a catalyst. As we have been following all developments closely, mainly our distinguished guests regarding the EU relationship within the member countries and countries like Turkey, who has affiliation with the EU, we are particularly interested in those areas that might call for enhanced cooperation between EU and generally and Italy and Turkey. I believe that at this pivotal time for Europe and for Italy and for Turkey especially, we are immensely pleased to be able to host our really expert speakers and gather some insights on the direction of these relationships in this very crucial strategic relationships that we are heading in. As many of you will know, our distinguished guests are experts in their fields who have spent much of their careers shaping the present and future of EU-Turkish relations. His Excellency Mehmet Kemal Bozay has been representing the Republic of Turkey in Brussels since 2019. And of course, Mr. Stefano Monservisi, who in 2014 was appointed head of the EU delegation to Turkey. And he had a role, an important role during this time in which he spearheaded bilateral talks between Turkey and the Union. For everyone, I'd like to start my questions with a very brief introduction about the COVID-19. As COVID-19 as everyone calls it, as a black swan of 2020, we all think that it will have a major impact on every aspect of our life. Although we don't have a crystal ball to shed light on what we will be seeing in the future, today I hope to discuss this current status of global landscape, its implication for the EU, and Turkey-EU-Italy relations, in particular with our speakers. Now, if I may, I would like to start with the current context, and would like to ask some questions first to Mr. Manservisi. Mr. Manservisi, the EU has been criticized for a lack of coordinated response to common crisis, and COVID-19 appears to be no different. What is your take on this? How do you think the EU responded to the COVID-19, and what do you think about the lately announced 50 billion recovery fund plan, how it will be used? So this is my first question to you, to let you know that all these questions has been collected from our members, so I just rephrase them and to put it together in order to make it easier for you. So the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to DEİK for having organized this important conversation. Allow me to say first one thing concerning the environment, and then we'll go more into the detail of the question. I mean, the environment is fundamental because we are watching, you know, one of the most biggest, let's say, revolution which is ongoing since the end of the World War II. I mean, this pandemic has hit people, healthcare, and therefore the notion of centrality of people in all this. Second is hitting and will hit our economies for a while. You know, you have seen the dropping of the GDP, the dropping of the consumption rate, the dropping of trade relations, you know, worldwide. And third, it is creating, let's say, a question mark about what is the global system in which we are living. Global system meaning economy, meaning globalization, supply chains, and politically where we can have a place to settle, to, let's say, to deal with the big issues and to find a compromise. You know, we see a lot of polarization, plurilateralism, as somebody says, but is missing a bit of place, including on the pandemic. You know, you've seen the other day the discussion at the General Assembly of the WHO, which was on one side very good, but on the other side still showing sign of division. So simply, we are in a context in which people, economy, global are at stake. This, allow me to say, from the beginning, should suggest a bit of thinking about the EU-Turkey relations, you know, which are suffering, in my view, from a disease of short-termism, you know, fixing issues, you know, I mean, looking at the short-term opportunity or short-term problem. I think that the partnership intense, which has made and is still making Turkey as a candidate, you know, deserve to be seen into this context, and deserves to have a bit more strategic, medium and long-term perspective, because otherwise, you know, we'll go on in this way. Therefore, and I think that including the economic impact that this is creating on the EU-Turkey relations, you know, the trade which is falling, you know, the GDP which is falling, you know, are showing first the problem, but also possible way out, because it's showing how deeply integrated our economies and eventually our societies are already. Therefore, this is the context in which we should put ourselves, I think. And I think this should suggest maybe some new way of thinking about our relation, firmly remaining into the accession process, but having also a more long-term perspective. Now, this is the environment which matters. Concerning what the Union has done, well, I mean, the Union, and in particular, the Commission, is not equipped to work to deal with immediate crisis. You know, apart from humanitarian, you know, it takes time. I mean, the older machine is not formatted in order to be immediately operational. We have seen that several times also in the past. In this particular area, it is also to underline that the Union has no specific competence in healthcare. So, you know, you had immediately a pandemic, you had a declaration of, you know, impact in terms of health with a Union which basically has very little power. So there is also, let's say, a conceptual but from this point of view, at the very beginning, what happened was that the Union was certainly slow and very slow in in dealing with what are the fallout of all this on internal market, free circulation of people, you know, the welfare distribution, you know, the reaction was quite quickly, let's suspend, you know, the rules which are creating a sort of straitjacket. State aid, the Stability Pact, you know, let's allow member states to take measures, which was, let's say, phase one, surprise and a bit of shock. Phase two, let's liberate. Phase three, starting to identify some measures in order to, let's say, inject money in order to expand the fiscal space of the state, in order to start compensating the losses, in particular, of a lockdown of the economic activity. I remember here the intervention of the central bank, the project to reform the availability of the stability mechanism funds, and third, the SURE mechanism, which is probably one of the most important because it's the first time that the European Union is intervening in order to support unemployment scheme. So, phase one, surprise. Phase two, let them go. Phase three, let's start defining what is, let's say, the intervention that the Union could do in order to support the fiscal space. And in this context, also, the awareness of the fact that the single market was at risk because member states were taking unilateral measures. And therefore, this was hitting at the very heart, not at the single economies, but the essence, you know, of what is the identity and the reality of the European Union. So it was slow, it was progressive, but now I guess later we'll have also the opportunity to discuss about what next, because what is likely to be proposed on the 27th by the Commission in the new multi-annual financial framework could be a game changer if, you know, all the elements which are around could be, let's say, could be upheld by this and can be proposed. Allow me to say a last point. Certainly, the Union was and still is under stress. And let's say divergences inside are visible. But it's also visible, you know, progressively, how deeply integrated we are and how difficult, if not impossible, it is for each member state to take measures. Look at this debate between the Netherlands and Italy, you know, the very beginning, you know, a few weeks ago, you know, those saying, looking for solidarity, and the others saying, well, yes, but under condition, etc., etc. You know, this revealed what? In reality, a common interest of having a common framework in which all this could have been framed and driven. So simply monetary transfer are important, but are not the essence of the Union. The essence of the Union is to decide together about common objective and common goals. Progressively, this is now taking shape and replacing this debate which happened at the beginning, which was give me because you are richer, give me because I'm in difficulties, I don't give you because you have responsibility. This is not the point. It was at the beginning a bit. You know, everybody must go through new experiences, but now is a bit more back on track. But it is a stress test for the Union, among the hardest I personally have seen, and is still ongoing. It's not finished.
Thank you. So I will say I have two more questions, which I will say later about the unilateral acting and the importance of the essence of union. But that I will say for later. Now, Mr. Ambassador, we know that you are really working hard in Brussels and you know, seeing everything from Turkey's perspective and analyzing what's happening. So my question is to you will be from the Turkey's perspective. After some political tensions at the start of the year, dialogue appears to have improved. This is what we see from here, as evidenced by Turkey joining the European Commission's COVID Global Response Conference. So what is the current state of the EU-Turkey relationships and how we are dealing with the member states? So can you comment on that, please?
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be part of this occasion, this arrangement. And I would like to underline one fact. I'm also very glad to share the podium or webinar with Stefano, who has contributed a lot to Turkey-EU relations during his tenure. And it was one of the best times ever. Now the Ambassador Christian Berger is also working very hard, but the conditions are not right. And at the outset, first of all, I would like to make two remarks in the scope of the three actors of the title of our conversation: EU, Turkey, Italy. First of all, with Italy, I need to underline that our relations as two countries are so interdependent in economy, in FDI, in many things. And with Italy, we sail together. And after all these crises, either we sail together or we fail together. And in order to not to fail, we should work together. And then I would like to add the third actor of this conversation, the EU. And inside EU, we need friends like Italy. And all the openings in the future path of Turkey-EU relations are also depending on the country's approach. Friendly countries like Italy's approach will determine the future of the EU relations. And after giving these two things, saying that we are in the same boat, we should sail together, and Italy's role in Turkey-EU relations are very crucial and vital. After that, in 15 July 2019, there were measures related with some political issues, and these measures were not fair, not well prepared, and due to those measures, our relations got strained with EU. And for a long time, it continued like that. Later on, the new administration wanted to open a new dialogue channel, and the first day she was in her office, President von der Leyen called our president 1st of December on Sunday and said that there is a will to, she said that there was a will to open a new dialogue. And after that, to make long story short, we came to the point 9th of March, our president came to Brussels and had a meeting with both presidents. And also our foreign minister participated in this meeting. It was the eve of the COVID crisis, start of the COVID pandemic. And in that meeting, the leaders, they decided to open a new page based on working on the 18 March deal. This deal was not only a asylum seeker Syrians deal. There were many things in it, and there were some commitments of the EU, and our president asked both presidents how to work and to fulfill these commitments and to have a better roadmap for the Turkey-EU future relations. And we started with this 9th of March dialogue. We started a new consultations, and these are going on. These consultations are on customs of union, modernization of customs union, visa liberalization, how to proceed with Turkey's accession process. We are doing it in a constructive and realistic way from both sides. There is a will, and this is where we are. And COVID pandemic brought another aspect to this dialogue. It is more compulsory than before. And in his recent conversation with President von der Leyen, our president also mentioned that the modernization of customs union is not an exercise anymore. It is a compulsory thing we should do. And participating in this donors conference also showed Turkey's goodwill and Turkey's commitment to work together with the EU, fighting against this crisis. And we are there now. In that sense, I don't know, there might be some other questions to evaluate EU's position for COVID or something. I might say something related to those questions as well. We work hard, and here I'm sure there are many business people are following us now. Business circles are the main interlocutor and are the main chain for us to enhance Turkey-EU relations. This is the engine. Business people are the engine power of these relations, and we should concentrate on to find ways in this crisis time how we can handle Turkey-EU relations through business circles. And one of the important things, Business Europe, one of the biggest circles of the EU business people, recently they published a report, and the importance of this report is the content of it, because it was related, and it was the main subject was what to do after COVID and how to handle COVID crisis. And one of the recommendations is directly addressed to Turkey, saying that we should have customs union with Turkey, and we should find some ways for supply chains to cooperate with Turkey. You know, in order to reach some new modalities, there should be will from both sides. It means that Turkish people, business people, they would like to modernize customs union. They would like to find ways to improve and enhance the Turkey-EU relations in business field. And also, this is it has its reflections in the EU business circles. We should use this opportunity, and we should do it fast. We should do it in an efficient way. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Ambassador, I would like to continue with you with another question. I know that you are very much expert on, in the Balkan region, and you know those countries, and you served for Turkey in those areas. So I have some questions about that to you. As Europe has become the epicenter of the COVID-19 in late March, the first problem we faced with regard to continue business was logistics. You are very well aware of the problem. So there were lines exceeding 50 kilometers at Turkey's borders with European countries. Then the problem was solved in 2 weeks. And so, Mr. Ambassador, how Turkey and EU responded to this problem, and how can we strengthen our logistics against potential future problems like this? Because as everybody knows, the mobility is everything. So this is why we are discussing, visa liberalization, or we are discussing all these issues. So mobility was at stake during this pandemic. So can you comment on that, what we will do, what will be the next, because this is the core of the trade,
When after the outbreak of COVID-19, measures were taken by EU about and supply chains. And the first thing in the field I received as a request from the EU was a Turkish contact point, how to efficiently start working for these supply chains. And it showed that the main issue between Turkey-EU relations during the crisis of COVID-19 was how to keep the supply chain. Immediately, our Minister of Transportation provided the contact point, and we start to work on by running the trade contacts, by having some kind of arrangements with Bulgaria and other countries. And this also showed us that Turkey-EU relations are also based on good supply chain relations, which is one of the main issues of the today's discussions. There are two main subjects we are dealing with. One is supply chains and global value chains. And Turkey is in the center of all these chains. When we speak about the Balkans, you know, I would like to add Italy here. You know, there is famous Silk Road project of China. Turkey is also expert on its own Silk Road projects. With the EU, one of the main projects we were working on with IPA funds was the renovation and restoration of the railroads, which is connecting Turkey to Europe. And this railroad goes through the Balkans. And when we have this project, when we achieved and then we completed this project, we have a better line for TEN-T, interconnectivity concept of the EU and for us. And the Balkans is a very central place. Turkey is very strong in the Balkans. And I feel that to make an artificial distinction between Western Balkans and Turkey is not the way to enhance our cooperation. First of all, EU and Turkey should work together in this region. And there is also one of the reflections of COVID-19 to the EU agenda was about enlargement process. Even there was a crisis, the EU decided to add Albania and North Macedonia to the accession process. And these two countries are very strong partners with Turkey. We have big investments, business people, our Turkish business people are there. And when I say this, to make our Silk Road and let's say Road and Belt project, Italy is very crucial there because Bari, Brindisi, Trieste, Venice, all these ports are used by Turkish ships. And also we have so many cargo flights and logistics can go by all these means. And now COVID forces us to have combined transportation, and Turkey and Italy, they are two Mediterranean countries which are cooperating so well in many things. And in that sense, we can do things together in Western Balkans as well. Apart from that, Western Balkans is an area that Turkish business people are having some factories, some production lines, which are going to Italy, Germany, auto spare parts, textile factories. They are in Serbia, some agricultural products in Macedonia. And I know that DEİK's chairs in that region, in Kosovo, Merve Hanım, in Serbia, Ibrahim Bey, they are working very hard in order to make these lines more efficient. I know DEİK is very active in that sense. And instead of doing something separately with EU, we can do together something in Western Balkans, which will bring prosperity and welfare to that region. And we use our stock of economic power investment there, and we can join it with EU.
Okay, thank you. That was very important to mention, yes, and it's a very good point. We will try to discuss within our DEİK chairs in the Balkan how to bring forward your ideas, and we will let you know. Thank you. So I have two questions, one after the other to Mr. Manservisi. You both mentioned about COVID-19's effect, and of course we are getting used to live with it, but the future entails uncertainties, as you both mentioned. The question is, first question is how we will sail in these uncertainties. Unfortunately, COVID-19 tend to reopen long-standing also debates on the union authority, as well as tensions between and within member states. Some of them were mentioned during Mr. Manservisi's introduction. So this has led to some commentators forecasting, as we may say, a new nationalistic divide. within the EU. So along southern and northern lines, as it has been the landscape, its implication for the EU is important. And Turkey-EU-Italy relationships in this particular context is very important, knowing that both our distinguished guests are expert on EU, Italy, and Turkey positions. Now, I may like to ask, that do you think the EU responded to the COVID-19? How we will say in these uncertainties? What do you think about this lately announced 500 billion euro fund plan? And also some questions, so I may add now, from the Turkey's perspective afterwards, which is also regarding to that, the southern northern balance in Europe, as we see Turkey and Italy has important role. So please comment on those. Start with this.
Well, it's very complex. It will require, a dedicated webinar of a couple of hours to deal with all this. But I will try to give some, let's say, some reference points. In particular, enjoying my now much freer position. I'm outside the institution, therefore it can be, let's say, a bit maybe more balanced. Well, first, we are still in the middle of the crisis. So therefore, we are not out. Maybe the containment of the pandemic has started. Let's see if this will last. But, we are still in the middle of the crisis, and therefore there is no a magic recipe let's say, to restart, or even worse, to believe that we can start as we were doing before. I think all this now is part of the debate. What the new normal, what will be the future, the Green Deal, the digital, etc., etc. So all this is in the making. And I think we have to be quite humble on all this, because we have to learn a lot, in particular if we want to change. On this issue, my point is that two realities, like the European Union on one side and Turkey, which are so intimately linked, 50% of the export of Turkey is to the Union, and they say added value chain, which is making Turkey the 5th biggest, let's say, market in good, but the number in the ranking is not reflecting in full the integration. The first issue is that two realities which are so intimately linked and that already have built supply chains which can give ideas for the future must or should at least think together about what is the future. And, I think that political environment is important. The post 9th of March meeting is obviously crucial, but my conviction is that the business people and people at large should take initiatives, because there should be a lot of concrete bottom-up. This is point number one. Point number two, the crisis is not over also inside the Union. I think that measures were taken in order to prevent the disruption of the single market, but you realize that at a certain moment, member states were just managing import and export among member states as if we were still before the single market. It's something, that gives you the level and the scale of the problem. Now, Turkey should be among the first in defending the single market, because, there could be drivers inside, like Italy. I'll come back on this. But certainly the big asset is Turkey being in custom union with the single market, and the single market being in custom union with Turkey. So therefore, I think that there are some fundamentals of the European debate, which are also Turkish debate, if I may say that in this way. So therefore, and this is not just a question for committee of experts, of diplomats and politicians, it's a question for the daily life of business plan, the daily life of people. Therefore, I think that if there is a case showing that intimately that Turkey and the European Union are intimately linked is this one. You know, the European debate is a Turkish debate. And what I think is that the European Union is not paying attention enough to the Turkish debate, if I may say so that in this way. So therefore, I think that this is my second point. The third point is that, you know, what is among many things that it is now in the discussion through different paper and the reflections which are animated by the European Commission. Take the industrial policy papers which have been produced by Commissioner Breton. Look at the European semester just proposed by Commissioner Gentiloni. Look at the sectorial policy, the Green Deal, the digital, etc., etc. You know, all this now is to be, they say, reshaped in view of not only the crisis inside, but also the sustainability of the global world, which is today is too much driven by the, let's say, inverted comma, tensions and conflict between China and the United States. Now, I hope that this will not drive us too far, and I believe, and I hope that multilateral, like UN, you know, will come back in playing a role. But the matter of fact is that the post-crisis is about to be shaped by different actors which are, let's say, which are creating at least stress. Which is the third actor in all this? Is the European Union, which is precisely shaping its own, let's say, strategy, having in mind the problem inside, but also in which context this is solved. Take the issue of the supply chains in the health sector, for example. Everybody is talking about now. We are too much depending from China, for example. I don't say that in a critical way, but simply it is the debate. So the issue of reshaping, reshoring, partially or not, the supply chain is an issue. Now, what I wanted to say from this point of view is that Turkey is also part of this debate. You know, I mean, because Turkey is part of this third pole. You know, I leave aside politics now, you know, about alliances, etc., etc. But economically speaking, you know, Turkey is part of the building of this third actor between United States and China. You know, this is the reality of our economies. Now, I think that this should be matched better by the political debate. I hope this will, and obviously I'm watching what's going on, will be better framed by political, let's say, initiatives, although I have some doubts because clearly there are some problems, but certainly it must be pushed and forcefully by the business community. The reshaping of, possible reshaping of the European industrial policy and the supply chain must be done jointly by the business community of Europe and the business community of Turkey, because we are belonging to the same reality, geopolitically and geoeconomically. This is what is still a bit missing. And the paper of Business Europe is important, but I think we have to work much more on this. Now, inside this, you know, the role of certain drivers like Italy is powerful. Because, you know, I mean, Italy has shown what? Before the crisis and during the crisis. First, that there is trust. You know, Italian company didn't withdraw from Turkey, are not withdrawing from Turkey, are still inviting other investing in Turkey, you know. Therefore, it's a matter of trust, meaning that this is a capital that in this day must be enhanced strongly, because trust is at the origin of everything, you know, sincere trust. This is the point. And second is because, you know, if you have seen they recently published at the beginning of the year survey, which was done by CESPI, you know, an important Italian think tank, about, you know, what is the perception and the reality of the economic, let's say, relationship between Turkey and Italy, you know, the rate of, the positive rate was 9 out of 10. You know, it means that there is not only trust, but there is also eagerness to do more. And it is enough to see, you know, the relationship from the machine tool, let's say, sector to the energy sector, and all the projects which are based on Turkey's strategic position on gas and oil will remain strategic. And I'm sure I was speaking with many actors, I mean, recently, they are keen to invest even more. But what I would like to say is that, you know, it is not enough now when we are redesigning, you know, our future to do that in a business as usual on the short term. We need a leap forward. We need something much more integrated. We are part not only of the same reality, but we are part of the same way to shape the world after. And this is still missing, if I may say. And we should work about this. Now, the 500 billion, let's see, because certainly what France and Germany proposed is a breakthrough, because for the first time, basically, they envision Eurobonds generating grants. This is what they say. The amount of 500 billion obviously is not matching what is the scale of the necessity as described by the IMF, by all the watchers and the same commission. So let's see what, you know, it will be the final product. But this is an important move. You know, let's not distribute already what we don't have yet. You know, let's see that as a big contribution to something which is changing, presumably, the shape of the multi-annual financial framework of the European budget, not just the usual 1% to be distributed with key, but something much more to be, let's say, part of the recovery and reshaping. I think that also on this, the relationship between the Union and Turkey should also change. It's not just a question to have a budget for helping Turkey. I mean, Turkey, I saw this personally, and you know, I was also negotiating this. Turkey managed all the refugees from Syria as never has done in the world. Nobody has done that in the world, never. Okay, you know. And the point is not just to pay a bit. The problem is to conceive this area as a common one, and therefore to formulate right policies together, to share burden together, and to deal with the sources of these people together. Now, the same should be true for the next financial package. It's not just a question of allocating money here and there. In my view, the real point will be how, through this, the Union and Turkey can leverage, you know, a new common project in terms of economic integration. This is the point. Look at the currency issue in Turkey, you know. Everybody knows, which is the dire situation of the foreign currency reserve in the central bank. Look at what the European Central Bank could do in Turkey through swap agreement in order to put the money also to the service of this economic integration that we have. All these are, let's say, avenues that we have to think together, in my view, in the next months. Because this is the level of the challenge that we have on both sides. Not just short fixing measures, but a bigger thinking together on our integration and on our how we can be together in being this third pole, you know, which is not exclusive one, but certainly which will contribute to a better governance also in economic terms. Thank you.
Thank you. Really, it's very important what you mentioned, because you know, we see that the economy and the reactions of the countries are differing. So this will also affect the future of Europe, how they will manage this problem. But since you mentioned about both Mr. Ambassador and you about the supply chain and you know, and related problems with the commerce. So I want to a little bit deepen this subject, because I want you both to share your perspectives on this. Do you think that EU will look to reshape its commercial arrangements? Because prior COVID, there were some signs that, you know, Europe is a little bit slower, and, you know, we have increased the vitesse, and then, so we have to be more pragmatic. And as you know, there are STAs signing with different countries prior to COVID. We also see some discussions among commentators. They say that the pandemic might mark the start of deglobalization. So this is also what we read from between the lines. And also in UNCTAD, I saw recently, due to the world trade to decrease by 13 to 32%, they foresee a 30-40% decrease in FDI. So Turkey and emerging markets are looking, for the FDIs, flowing to the country. And so considering all of these, and specifically also for Mr. Ambassador, how can Turkey and EU strengthen their relationship regarding, more close commercial agreements? And we have this modernization of obviously the customs union, which is now on hold. So what is your views on this? Can you elaborate on this? And do you see also trade creating opportunities between Turkey and Italy with regard to specific sectors? Also mentioning Italy, because we do a lot of businesses. We have complementary sectors like machine, white goods, textile, etc. So that specific last question is to Mr. Manservisi, but the rest of the questions for both. I think I'd like to start with Mr. Ambassador, then come back to you about this commercial agreements, arrangements, and the future of economic relationship with Turkey. Yes, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We should address and analyze what's happening so well and put the stones on the right places. Actually, the fireball was on the way to our planet. This was accelerated by COVID-19 because of the competition between US and China. Already things were going to be redesigned. As Stefano mentioned, this is a matter of how to change the framework of the new world order, global order. It was already going on, and COVID-19 accelerated this project, this process. So what we will hear, we are talking about supply chain, value chain, and how to arrange these things. The main umbrella of all these things that we will hear more and more, because the US administration made a statement on that on 7th of May, it is economic prosperity network. This is a way to contain each other and to block each other, when I say each other, US and China, in order to have this global framework in advantage of themselves individually. So this economic prosperity network fight makes the EU being squeezed between two giants, and EU has a big potential, and EU's potential and the capacity can only be strengthened, also getting, after Brexit, some new capacities. And with 82 million population, with its strong industry, with its strong and young population, Turkey is the natural main actor that EU can make in order to have this, in order to have a better place in this economic prosperity network. And in that fight, research and development is a very big, very important area, because the Commission, EU Commission, came and said that we will be a geopolitical commission. Being a geopolitical commission means that not to Iceland acting like an Icelandization of the continent. It is not closing yourself, but going to the other places. And when you go to the other part of the world, this is MENA geography, Middle East and North Africa, Asia, America. And in these geographies, Turkey is a key geographic and political actor. And in order to have this EU to have a better place in this economic prosperity network, should cooperate with Turkey well, and we should find some modalities. And in that sense, there are some free trade agreements with other countries. However, it showed that now, after COVID-19, regionalization will be more powerful than globalization. When you look at the regionalization, when you look at the map, you see Turkey is the closest partner to the EU. And here, also for Turkey, closest partner is EU countries. We need to find ways how to go like that. And in that sense, I believe we need to have better, we have to talk together. We have to, as Stefano underlined twice or three times, business circles should find a way. Because as diplomats, as politicians, the guidance should be given by the business circles. As you mentioned with Italy, there are some sectors, textile sectors, we should find our complementary parts that they already exist, and now we should concentrate on that. And with the EU, we are working on these things. And when we are having, you know, these green lanes, which is the main project of the EU related with the COVID-19, Turkey is in a very central role. And now another main project or a new project of EU is Green Deal. And this Green Deal is something changing the structure of consumption and production standards. And there we need to work together. Here, what I believe that our concentration with the EU, because the EU at the beginning had some problems, because, you know, in the university you study and then the question comes from a chapter that you didn't work on. And this was like that for the EU. It came from the health the sector. And in that sense, though there were some plans saying that main security is the human security, we should have some plans for the pandemics and other things, the EU countries couldn't realize their plans when there was a crisis. But Turkey was very good in that. When I checked the pandemic strategy documents of the EU, I see that individual countries prepared them in 2006, 2010, even the biggest countries, their plans were not so updated. Turkey's pandemic plan was 2019. And there is also an area that we can cooperate, these medical issues, and Turkey immediately produced some medical the goods. Immediately, our textile sector transformed itself to a sector producing masks. And our factories transformed themselves to produce respiratories in a very short time. And we start to send these respiratories and masks to our European friends and all over the world, almost 60 countries. And this is also an area that we can cooperate, and we should start by doing so. I believe also these areas like Asia, Central Asia, we have also connections. North Africa, you know, we have problems in Libya, but together with Italy, we are in the same line, and we should concentrate our efforts for future activities in North Africa. And there, instead of having some controversial acts, we should sit together, the EU countries and Turkey, and find a peaceful solution to these areas, because these areas will be Middle East and North Africa, will be the areas, the geographies that Turkey, EU, and individually Turkey and EU countries will make openings together with the business circles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. So now the turn is to Mr. Manservisi, but I want to comment on two things. Yes, you mentioned also prior, Mr. Manservisi mentioned about the new possibilities. So you both mentioned about R&D and innovation areas to discover more together, and closer cooperation areas like Green Deal, and you know, this is new subject of EU, and the digital single market, as you mentioned, Mr. Manservisi, in the beginning of your comments. So in general, the industrial strategy of EU for the future, this is what Turkey can Turkey play a role in that, so that will help to enhance our existing relationships and, you know, put us on a new track, you know, not also staying on the same path and repeating, you know, always the same rhetoric, you know. Of course, I understand Mr. Ambassador's concern, and this is our, as a nation, concern. You know, without mobility, everything is useless. So the visa liberalization and the modernization of, you know, customs unions are at the core of the issue. This has to be solved. But if we can see this not from the you know, points that we left before COVID, but with a new, let's say, new perspective, if there are new doors to be open for this, it will be very important for us to hear your comment on that. Of course, this is related as the prior question with the commercial agreements and how Europe will continue its path, you know, of this commercial relationships. What is the position of Turkey in this context? Obviously, there was a good comment from our ambassador about the cooperation in foreign policy. You know, Italy and Turkey have strong ties with Western, with US as well, and US is reluctant to act as the world leader right now. So EU as one of the biggest economic and you know, it's a social, it's a you know, project. So EU has a responsibility according to on his shoulder. So can we find as EU and Turkey and with the specific let's say emphasis with the EU-Italy relationship, can we discover opportunities in Africa or in foreign policy altogether, you know, to open up new horizons for Turkey and Europe, Turkey and Italy? As you mentioned, CESPI was a very good sign for us because there is eagerness to work from Italy's side. But can we see this eagerness also with this new COVID-19 perspective from all European countries? And afterwards, I would like some questions about Germany, but we will continue. So that will be my last question. So please comment on these issues where Mr. Ambassador left.
Look, I think that first on the trade agreements and globalization, I think, you know, I don't think that we will go towards the deglobalization, but certainly we are going towards something which is, let's say, making the globalization not based only on the short-term profit, but based on a certain number of other considerations. For example, the health of people, you know, the inclusiveness is not just a question of profit, it's a question more complex. Therefore, this will presumably imply to make a certain supply chain shorter, to look at, let's say, trade not just as a way to liberalize, let's say, I mean, economic relation, but as a function of strategic industrial policy choices. Like, for example, within the Green Deal, the discussion about carbon taxation for the entry into the single market. So, simply to say that deglobalization, I don't think, personally, I don't hope, because I think that, you know, if we go back to state managed or too strictly regionally managed economy, this will create further tension. So, but in any case, we will have to reshape, certainly, and let's say the way in which globalization will be seen not only opportunities and profit on one side and exclusions and risk on the other. This should be better managed. This is what I still believe, that on this, you know, Turkey and the Union should think about this together. What is not happening yet, okay? But this, I think, is one point. Second point, on the free trade agreements. I think that this will not decrease. On the contrary, I think that this should expand, because if we don't have, let's say, a global framework for, let's say, enhancing global rules for free trade, at least the European Union and Turkey have the experience and the reality and the interest of expanding a network of well-managed free trade, which is building, even if people are not looking at that so frequently, is building a new contribution for a global governance. So it is a step which can contribute to a global governance. Therefore, I think that more free trade agreement is not given for granted, but certainly should be the direction. In this free trade agreement, obviously, let's say the non-tariff, but rather what today is called the precautionary cluster, will be looked at very, very carefully. And we have to look at that this will not be turned into a new protectionism, because this is the reason. Now, this is for the for globalization and for the free trade. Now, inside the Union, or inside the, let's say, the area in which the Union is and Turkey is, I think that first, the risk of fragmentation of the single market is not entirely over yet. Look at the tourism service, for example, where, you know, intimately linked to the free movement of people is still not achieved. So therefore, we have to be vigilant that the single market is preserved and enhanced. This is something of the interest of Turkey, too. Second, I think we have to be, let's say, vigilant that the European Union is not thinking about its own recovery separate from what is the projection of the Union in the world, starting from its neighborhood. The recovery cannot be done in the Union without a recovery also elsewhere in the world. Developing countries, certainly far away, but where the Union has played always a big role, but starting from its own neighborhood and starting from the inner circle of the neighborhood, which are the candidate countries. So this is, you know, if Europe is building a recovery without having in this recovery not only a place, but a structural thinking with a close partner like Turkey, this will be a mistake, but is not achieved yet. It's something that Turkey and the Turkish business community must be vigilant on with the European one. The third one is about, you know, what to do. Let's take the two big issues. One is the Green Deal and the other is the digital transformation. Can we build something which is, you know, common as an industrial project of transformation, European Union and Turkey? It's not just a question of exchanges. It's a question of a model of society. This is not discussed yet. It should be done in the next weeks, because we cannot believe that, you know, we can enhance the custom union on one side, but on two different and diverging models of industrial policy and of transformation of the society, in particular through the climate change and Green Deal. The same is true for digitalization. No. Do we realize that until a couple of weeks ago, we had 1.5 billion people working through digital devices? You know, this is, I mean, did you realize what e-commerce means? Do you realize what the digital skills, you know, mean? So all this are issues on which the European Union is thinking, Turkey is thinking, but the thinking must be done together, because at the end of the day, you know, there is not a third way out of it. You know, this is a common, or it will be a conflicting. This is the reason why, you know, I think that the business community must push on this, because, you know, which is the position of Turkey on the Green Deal must be said. You know, this is not the politics of, you know, of what is creating sometimes problem because of whatever. It's daily life, it's daily choices. Now, in foreign policy is happening something very curious, you know, that take Libya, for example. You know? I mean, the European Union and Turkey are on the same side, okay? We are both supporting the UN recognized and backed government, the one of Sarraj, okay? But you notice also that, you know, the European press and even the European political declaration are carefully avoiding to say that. Is as if we were, you know, not doing and supporting the same let's say, the same government and being driven by the same objective. But if Turkey presence was problematic, I asked many colleagues, why is problematic? I mean, Turkey is wanting presumably the same thing that we want. Yes, but what is showing that the level of trust here and the discussion here has not reached a point which is allowing to look at the things in a more objective way. From this point of view, coming back to the role of certain member states, paradoxically, the fact that the foreign policy is still very much handled by member states could be useful for once, because you could have countries like Italy, which for a number of reasons, can help in driving this in a different way. Take, for example, what it was at a certain moment, a couple of months ago, the Cairo Declaration that let's say, Italy didn't subscribe, and rightly so, because it was totally unbalanced. Now, I think that from this point of view, a country like Italy and others, I think about Spain also, for example, and some others, can play an important role in order to shape and contributing in shaping a new position, which is still, in my view, unshaped and, still hesitating in what we have to do. Now, last point, Africa and developing countries. This will open another chapter. But simply to say that, when I used to go in the Horn very frequently, and when I used to go to Somalia in particular, I always managed to go and talk to the Turkish ambassador over there, because it was visible that the only companies of a country which are taking risk to build buildings, managing the airport, managing the port, building big settlement, including a big mosque, which is just opposite to the international airport, and taking the risk of, let's say, restarting with infrastructure in Somalia was Turkey, Then I think that, for example, in realities like this one, we should find a way to work together. In one of the last things I've done in my capacity of DG of development cooperation was to have an exchange of letter with the DG of TICA in order precisely to launch permanent dialogue, in order not only to say, look, we are doing this, we are doing that, we are doing well, we are doing bad, but to think together what to do in Somalia, for example, what to do in several other countries in which we are in any case present. Take Central Asia, another area in which I think it is crucial for interest and for development, and for a peaceful development, by the way. I think that, what is missing is that sometimes dialogue are there, but the reasons why and what we want to reach with this dialogue is a bit missing, if I may say in a very straightforward way. And I think that, again, since the political reality remains difficult, for a number of reasons, I think that the protagonists of the real reality, which are the business, which are the people, should play a role in order to push and to challenge a bit what politics cannot do. Economics, solidarity, and investment could push a bit more. This is what I'm convinced.
Thank you. So I think there was a question from the audience that reached to me, but what you said is now covers that question, because the question was, do you think sincerely the EU and Turkey finally abandon prejudice for opportunities and benefits in the new era? So it was a question for both, but I think Mr. Manservisi said that, if we try to look from a different angle and leaving behind the prejudice and, allowing countries like Italy and Spain, which has more influence in the Mediterranean area, which has a different culture, the foreign policy might be different. And there is a chance for Turkey, this what I understood, to be involved more, also considering what Turkey did and took a risk, as you said, in the Africa, in the Caucasian countries, etc. So there is a strong hope if we live and abandon prejudice. This is what I understand. Do you agree with that? Both. Yeah, we can start.
I fully agree. I don't think, to be honest, that because I'm still reading a bit, at least part of the Turkish press. I think that, the Turkish side, the idea that there is a prejudice and the idea that they are maneuvering against Turkey should also be abandoned, because there are no prejudice. Their criticism could be legitimate, could be less legitimate, concerning, the measures of the public order, concerning the judiciary, concerning many things. Fine, but there is no prejudice. And I think that Turkey and part of the Turkish public opinion should come out from this idea that, Turkey is surrounded by many friends, at least from the European side. And therefore, more than prejudice, there is criticism. And sometimes it would be useful to address that in a more open way. This will facilitate. So therefore, for me, there is no prejudice. There is criticism, there is difficulty. But aside from that, in spite of all these difficulties, numbers pre-crisis were speaking. Opinion polls among, let's say, businessmen pre-crisis are speaking. The numbers of companies which are owned by Europeans as a foreign investor, is close to 20,000. This means solid trust, solid interest. Let's start from this. Let's talk about this. And I think that this could be, let's say, a powerful trigger in order to relaunch many things, including, the visa-free, that's on which I spent big part of my energy, and I was still, disappointed that we reached almost the last mile, and then it was stopped. But this is something that when the political environment will be addressed, this is something to be solved quickly, because this is one of the highest measure of confidence, of trust, of mutual trust. Now, let's put from this point of view. I will, let's say, calm down a bit the idea that they are prejudiced. There are strong criticisms. I have to say that, being a Turkey watcher since many years, that there is a lot of ignorance also, on the European Union side. But the same is also partially true on the Turkish side, And when the Turkish press is too quickly, let's say, attacking, criticizing, in a sense of prejudice, is not making a big service. Exactly like when, the European press or some European press is describing Turkey as a dictatorship. This is not the point. This is not this is ignorance more than prejudice, But let's take another angle, and let's take the angle of the reality of people doing business and creating jobs and creating perspective. I think that the crisis is offering a powerful, let's say, avenue. It's the same in Europe. The debate north-south, east-west, populism, etc. now is taken for what it is. This is intoxication. The real issue is to build a new form of solidarity, new form of participation, new form of, let's say, inclusiveness, and Turkey must be, in my view, part of it. Cannot simply believe that it is part of a trade agreement. Turkey is much more than this, and we have to build on this.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, I'm looking forward to hear your opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with Stefano. Confidence building is needed, and what our president and the presence in the EU are trying to do this. The new path is that confidence building, having some joint projects. As Stefano mentioned, Turkey is very strong in many places. He mentioned about Somalia. Our biggest embassy compound is there. We are doing so well. He mentioned about Uzbekistan. In 2018, our president went to Uzbekistan, signed 41 agreements with Uzbekistan. And also, in February 2020, we hosted the president of Uzbekistan. There are new markets. And then we are going to those markets. We can go to those markets together if we have the confidence building. Because already, EU countries have the largest share investment in Turkey. 66 of the investments between 2002 to 2019 in Turkey are from European Union. And there are growing number of Turkish investments in the EU countries. Turkish firms are well integrated with the EU value chains and also supply chains. And Turkey contributes significantly to the EU firms' competitiveness. You mentioned about the UNCTAD report. And when you check the UNCTAD report, you can see that Turkish value added in Germany's total export is calculated as 7.5 billion US dollars, which is higher than 13 EU members, almost half of it. Germany is followed by the Netherlands and Italy in terms of Turkey's contribution to their export performance. This perfectly illustrates now how Turkey and European economies are attached to each other and through strong trade links. Despite all its benefits, we should modernize customs union to adapt ourselves after COVID, post-COVID world. And we need to have, in parallel with changing trends in the international trade, both EU and Turkey is concluding more comprehensive trade agreements. You mentioned about that with third countries. But then in order to harmonize our customs union with these agreements, we should get together and we should sit together. And one of the main issues our President and President von der Leyen talk, how to cooperate in research and development and innovation. And also they agreed to do things together in Horizon Europe, a multi-annual program, which is planned by the Commission entirely on research and innovation. And I believe I have a formula. I say that W is equal to T times I square. What means wealth is equal to talent times investment and innovation. This is the formula of future. If a country would like to have wealth and stability, it should use its talent and multiply it with investment and innovation. It means I square. And we are there. Turkey is one of the best countries applying this formula. We have concrete examples. As I mentioned, it's respiratory machines. It was combination of talent, investment, and innovation. We can do these things. Which countries, the countries which will not be there, will perish in the system and will be just part of the global order, which is designed by others. And Turkey and EU, if they combine their capacities, they can do something together. Otherwise, I agree with Stefano. I didn't deglobalization is not there, but there is a regionalization. And in this period, if we cooperate, we can be ready when it is more globalized. But there is a containment policy, like after the Second World War. Now, US is planning the military operations where US will deploy its forces in the Japanese islands. And also, it was said that administration was going to get more measures, sanctions against China, but the business circles in the US said, to whom we will sell the things. But on the other hand, antibiotics and some pills which were used in this pandemic, 60% of these pills and medicine was coming from China to Europe. And it was the same, 80% to US, because they gave up producing these things, and there was a big gap. And one of the reasons this illness went that wrong and that damaging was a lack in these sectors. And Turkey is a good place to do those things. Innovation is very important. We should do things together. And I believe also when we speak about innovation, about Western Balkans, there are very talented people in the Western Balkans. There are incubation centers, and Turkey, Italy, with other countries, we can have trilateral, quadrilateral projects in the scope of Horizon Europe. Our business circles can develop these projects. We should have academia, business circles, state, our institution of science and research. We need to do these things because the future of the world will be shaped by digitalization, innovation, research, and opening and having these things in the other parts of the globe. Turkey and EU, if we go hand to hand to those places, our gain will be more than we do it separately. You can do it separately, but EU should decide either it will be a global actor or regional actor. If they decide to be a regional actor, Turkey might have less in this picture. I don't want to be too ambitious, but one of the elements about EU's future, whether it will be a global actor, depends on its action, its transaction, and its connection with Turkey. in Ukraine, in Black Sea, in Mediterranean, in Middle East, in North Africa. If we do things in Central Asia, even in Latin America, if we do these things together, we reach somewhere together. And in this crisis period, as this is now less because China is a bit out due to the issues, and the supply chains are, it was seen that supply chains were very fragile. This is the time we start cooperation, and we should build upon that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have two more questions left coming from our audience. Those two are a little bit different questions from each other. One is, you know, we tend to discuss the pandemic in Europe from an economic point of view, but it's also becoming a political and constitutional crisis. So the recent example of this is the German Constitutional Court's decision, which stated that the European Central Bank did not respect the principle of proportionality. Do you think this will be a turning point in the history of EU? So this can be discussed. Also, thinking that Germany will take over the next EU, presidency, and of course both countries, Italy and Turkey's specific and deepen relationship with the Germany. And the other question is totally in a different corner, but I want to ask now so you can answer afterwards. How are recent East-Med energy developments impacting Italy and European neighborhood instruments' position with regard to the continuation of Southern Gas Corridor and the finishing of TAP project? So there are two questions. They are both asked for Mr. Ambassador and for Mr. Manservisi. So I don't know from which one you want to start. Maybe from Germany and then go to the TAP project. I think which will be better. Okay. Mr. Manservisi.
Okay. Well, on the German Constitutional Court ruling. Well, I'm still a lawyer, so therefore, you know, I used to respect what jurisdictions are saying, particularly the highest, but I also put them into a rule of law system. So therefore, from one point of view, I was not surprised by a ruling of a court which is based on a legal system which has always been not convinced by the relationship between the EU legal system and the national system, in particular through let's say, gray zone like economic and monetary policy. So therefore, it's not the first time, but this time it was particularly harsh, particularly direct, because basically the German Constitutional Court implied that the ruling of the European Court of Justice was not enough, was not clear enough, and was not binding enough. So in itself, the position and the reasons of the German Constitutional Court are not new, but the way in which this time they expressed themselves was particularly harsh and particularly, let's say, politically, could be interpreted politically, even if I don't like to interpret politically whatever a judiciary does. But I put that also in the rule of law system. You know, in any case, the European system is ruled in judiciary way by the European Court of Justice. So the constitutional courts, or whatever member state, can do and can say what they want. They bind on their state, but then their state has to face the reality of EU law. Therefore, you know, there is no infringement to open against Germany because of the ruling, but Germany must obey to what is the primacy of EU law. And therefore now they should explain to the German Constitutional Court why the proportionality principle has been respected. But this is, let's say, is creating certainly, or it is amplifying a problem, but in itself there is also the solution, which is in the hand now of the German government. And I have to say that the 500 billion proposal through Eurobond and whatever is already a better way of saying, look, we are convinced that we have to do more and not less. So then, you know, we'll see what it will happen, but certainly it is showing the, let's say, a certain disease. Now, is that only bad? Well, I think it's not only bad, because, you know, it is also obliging, you know, political authorities that sometimes are a bit hiding behind, you know, institutions like the central bank or others, you know, to take upfront responsibilities, and which is now appearing a bit in Germany. You know, what the position taken by the foreign minister, by the position taken by the chancellor herself. I think, therefore, that all in all, this judgment, and leaving aside whatever political interpretation, could also be useful, because it is obvious that there are also gray zones in what we are doing. And this gray zone must be filled by open, transparent political decisions. So it is also an encouragement to do it much more. And therefore, you know, there is negative side, but there is also a positive side. Now, this is going much beyond Germany. You know, is an issue of how the Union is building its new standing. This is what it is about. I mean, the reason why, you know, the next package is much more than about distribution of money. You know, if what it is said in this day, you know, there will be for the first time a sort of real budget for intervening in investment, in jobs, etc., will be a totally different in a system in which the central bank is already buying, in which the monetary policy is already enhancing all what it is done. So from this point of view, I would say this judgment is certainly worrying on one side, must be, let's say, counterbalanced by the right movement by the German government, upheld by the European Court of Justice. But on the other side, it is also helpful in order to push the political level to take much more openly responsibility. And these responsibilities are those which are reshaping a bit the European Union in view of having a union better equipped. This is the point. Now, on, let's say, the issue of which kind of, let's say, global power or not, or regional power of the Union, I think this is obviously a fair question, you know, because in the Union cannot be only regional. The choice of the Union has always been to be stronger regionally in order to stand globally. This has always been, let's say, the essence of the European Union, which has been, let's say, which has anticipated even globalization, because after all, the construction of the single market was a sort of regional globalization governed. I mean, if you take the group of the richest country in the world, which putting themselves together, liberalizing everything with institutions, etc., is a way to create a regional globalization. This has allowed the Union to become a global actor, much more than foreign politics. You know, this is now. Since today, the challenges in order to define how to stay in this globalization fragmented and with different challenges like the climate change one is reshaping, you know, on this. Is Turkey willing to play game on this or not? You know, because it is true that without Turkey, the European Union cannot be fully global. But it is equally true that without being with the European Union, I mean, Turkey will hardly be a credible global actor. So therefore, this is the two things which today are in front of us. It's not black and white, but simply is to say the tendency. There are all the reasons to do much more together. This is the point. How, which step, etc., this politics will say, but a lot urgently must be said by the business community. This is what I think.
Thank you. Would you like to comment on this, Mr. Ambassador?
Yeah, sure. I would like to comment on the German court decision related with the European, Central Bank. There was also that decision, and it was an early warning to say that how this money, which will be allocated in future, to be used, because there's a 3-month period there, and I'm sure that European Central Bank, they have a very good legal team, and they will find ways to prove that they used it well. But this was an early warning and a preemptive move to show that we will give the money like this 500 billion, but we'll follow it as the taxpayers will ask from us. About, EastMed project, maybe I can talk a bit. Yes. The main energy corridor is Southern Gas Corridor. And we finished this TANAP part of it. It is the backbone of the project. And we are working on the top part of it. In TAP, we have some issues. Italian local authorities, they have some concerns, and as far as I know, the Italian central government is working on it. This will be the main issue, a main part of these energy corridors. And after that, when we finish TAP, Southern gas corridor will be completed, and we are also now in touch with Italy in order to follow it. EastMed project, maybe I can go in a way. There is another EastMed project which is not feasible at all. During my tenure in the region, I saw that this is not a feasible project, and I believe that it's a political project. In order to to get and to they are violating the rights of Turkey and the Turkish Northern Cyprus, Republic of Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, and there is no way that without Turkish consent and something could be done there, and it is not feasible, especially after COVID-19. It is less feasible in the prices that we see, and there is no automaticity in claiming that islands generate full maritime jurisdiction areas, and this project is based on some project which is based on not getting the consent of so many countries. And what we see that recently there are some agreements and some countries are refraining to be part of it. I am totally sure that EastMed project, which is run by, which is prepared by some regional countries, will not be it's not a feasible one, and I don't want to make more comment of that. But Southern gas corridor is the main energy line that EU and Turkey will use together, and Turkey will be the terminal of the project. Thank you.
If I may say on this, I think that economically the EastMed looks not particularly exciting. So therefore, this is something which should suggest to set it aside. I also have to say that, with the tap and tunnel, if we want to build a green economy, I think these are more than enough. With also the gas coming from the Nord Stream, I think that some economic reality should also suggest how to deal with all this in order to complete the framework, let's say.
Thank you. So I think we arrived at the end of our program webinar. So I believe I personally believe that we had an insightful and thought-provoking discussion. Yes, we mentioned about the Turkish-EU relationship, Turkish-Italy relationship, and in everything related with the global context. So I first would like to thank you all, participating from different, from DEİK, all our chairpersons and our from different business community, but of course the major thanks goes to, and with my heartfelt gratitude, to our distinguished speakers that sharing their expertise with us and with their insightful contribution. Really, I appreciate that. With no doubt, COVID-19 will be a litmus test for all of us and of our countries. It will change the meaning of being human and being a citizen, while also challenging governments on how to maintain accountability, credibility, and not going backward but going forward with the rethinking of the globalization region. I like very much your comment on Europe. Being regional is the strongest point of Europe, but but also this project has to be global. So I think with this idea, Europe and Turkey and Italy should think again on the possibilities. Obviously, road ahead of us is very long, and there will be many discussions on these issues. And obviously, it's not taken before, so it's very new to all of us. There will be obviously ups and downs. I believe what is important is to have a sense of direction. We know from Turkey that Turkey's direction is towards Europe and into more integration with Europe. As you said, there should be willingness from both sides, but I believe as a business community, we have this willingness, and with the help of our government, we will try to contribute more. And of course, as you mentioned, Europe without Turkey cannot be globalized. So this is an important comment. So we will take from there, and obviously we ask also industrial policy about Europe and the new subjects like digital single market and Green Deal, etc. And as mentioned, Mr. Ambassador, R&D and innovation. So square. With this in mind, I think we should contribute more on the future developments of industry and how Turkey can contribute, how Europe can use Turkey's abilities in terms of geographical position and industrial background and talent, so that there is a very interesting road ahead. Once Winston Churchill said, "Never waste a good crisis." This is very true. I hope this will be a crisis not wasted for Turkey, for Italy, and for the EU. We always appreciate Italy's support for Turkey, and we are good friends, and we do a lot of good projects. And I hope Italy taking more position in these subjects within Europe. Turkey's road also will be much more different than this. I really congratulate for your insightful thoughts, and hope to see you again in another EU talk within DEİK. And thank you for listening, and thank you for your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Zeynep Benim, and thank you, Mehmet Bey. Thank you.
Yeah, I will send you the report afterwards.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.